Hey guys, this is Joshua with Attktx. I'm going to try and shoot a quick installation slash tips and tricks video for you here real quick tonight. Yeah, let's just dive into it. So, stock frame, where it's been obviously taken apart and installed already, but we're going to use it to try and show you guys what we do to set these up and get you going. So, out of the box, first thing you want to do is remove your trigger shoe from the frame, or from the trigger shoe, from the trigger plate, I should say. And then once you've done that, the next thing you'd want to do is remove this upper pin to remove the bearing and washers that are in there. Again, obviously I've already done this once before, so it's loose, but you would drive it out from the left side of the frame towards the right side of the frame so that the knurling, you're not trying to force the knurling all the way through the frame. So once you drive that out, you would get the bearing and the two washers out of there. Set those aside, so if you ever want to set your frame back to stock, you can. And then once those bearings are out and that pin's out, the trigger plate can come out. Also set that aside so you can install it later or put it back to stock if you wanted to. Go ahead and reinstall from the same side the pin, because this is what locates our upper rail in the frame. Let me tap this in real quick. So once you've got the bearing and the trigger plate out, the next step would be to remove your factory spring if you don't want to use it. You'd need to undo this linkage anyway to kind of set up and tune the trigger, which we'll get to later. But for now, sorry, my voice is a little bad today. Go ahead and remove that pivot screw there and swing that out of the way. You can remove your stop screw here to get this spring out a little easier, but I found that if you undo that pivot, you can sneak the spring out just like that, even though I'm struggling a little bit. Again, set this aside and save it for later. Once you're at this point, you would then go in and remove and clean, or at least loosen, your two guide screws down here on the bottom. We initially did this with heat, but it's kind of a pain to throw flame on, heat these up to loosen the Loctite that's on there. I've heard and I've seen in different batches of these frames that the screws are easier to get out on the later ones than some of the newer ones. And we've seen some of the early frames we got were a nightmare to get apart, and some of the later ones have been pretty easy. But if you're having any problems and you don't want to use heat, grab some of our Uncure and just a couple of drops on either sides. Wait for a minute, 2 minutes. Grab your wrench and try to break them free. Don't over torque these, they will strip, and then you'll never get them out. But just working back and forth after a minute or so, if it still doesn't break free, apply a little more of the Uncure and go at it again. Eventually they will come free if they don't break free right away. Once you've got those out, some frames, I think most frames now, you have to screw them from the bottom out through the top, which is a little bit of a pain. But yeah, once you get those two screws out, you can clean them, and then when you go to reassemble everything, you put some, any Loctite, some of ours that we get, at whatever level, red, blue, purple, if you want to adjust them real easily. Yeah, so once you get those broken free, the next step is to take the bottom rail that has the divots in it, a bottom V-groove rail. And real quick side note, the reason we did the V-groove rails is so that, there's been bearing triggers out there before, but the V-groove actually, you have obviously bearings top and bottom, so you're not friction surfaces top and bottom, but the plate's actually narrower than the slot in the frame. So the V-grooves hold the plate centered so it's not touching left or right, and the bearings ride top and bottom, so you have literally a frictionless trigger plate. So anyway, sorry about the tangent. So first things first, once you've broken the screws free, go ahead and slip your bottom rail in and align those two divots with the little grub screws down the bottom. Let's see if we can get the light in there. Yeah, the two divots will sit over the two screws. And once you get, I've found it's easy just to slide in from the front right there through the trigger guard. Another side note, the slots in these frames seem to vary a little bit. We picked kind of the higher end on the tolerance so that it'll be a good fit for most frames. You may find with some frames that you'll need to take a piece of like 1000 grit sandpaper or something and sand them down just a little bit on some of the frames if it's tight on the width of the slot here. But most cases it should fit okay. But yeah. Okay, so once you've got the bottom rail in, you would take your trigger plate with the bearings and drop that in. And then your top plate, or your top track, excuse me, with the notch that's located on that pin. Now here you would kind of roughly adjust your screws in. If you backed them all the way out or whatever you did, you get them close to where the top of the top track is even with the top of the frame, so you could adjust those up evenly. And then once you get that pretty close, the next thing you'd want to do is throw this on your gun without the spring or anything. All the linkages disconnected, and without the three-way, so that you can fine-tune the fitment of the adjustment of those set screws on the bottom of the bottom rail. So with that all in there, these can be a little bit fiddly until you get used to it, but you get it all kind of stacked in there, place it on there, grab your frame screws. Oop. And get those in there. Hopefully I'm in frame here. So tighten those down. Oh, that's way too tight. You back those out. Okay, so what you're looking for here is, I believe, where the bottom bearing is kind of close to this front screw. So start there, and what you're looking for is you'd adjust this in until you feel it starting to kind of bind where there's not movement in the plate anymore. And if gravity, you can kind of tell if it moves freely. If it's too tight, obviously it won't move. And again, you're looking to eliminate that up and down play in there, but you don't want it to bind. And then we can evenly kind of move these screws up. That was too much on the rear frame, rear guide screw. Maybe a little bit in the front. Yeah, so it freely moves in the frame. Sorry, bad lighting. With gravity. And there's no play up and down at the front or at the back. So I have a little bit of play still. So I'll take just a hair out. Or tighten it up just a hair. So again, no play front or top to bottom. we're still kind of binding. Something's still not quite right there. Yeah, so freely moves in the frame, but doesn't have excessive play up and down, and that's where you want it ideally. Still got something. A little bit. There we go. Okay, that seems to be good. So once you get the rails adjusted appropriately, you would go ahead and select whatever spring you want, our medium or our light spring. These are kind of rough ballparks on what we thought might be good or what might work with most, selections of parts out there, depending on the three-way spring, or yeah, whatever three-way, whatever pressures you're running, whatever hammer spring or hammer weight you have. Obviously, you can get whatever springs and put them in there. So anyway, select whatever spring you want. Again, I find with this linkage undone here, you can slip the spring in underneath and then run that back, or run the linkage back over the top of the spring, and then grab your pivot screw and reinstall it. So another side note, we spent a bunch of time playing with different ramp angles on the trigger plates. So your standard stock plate has a vertical surface, whereas ours has, I believe this one's, I want to say a 20-degree plate, and I could be wrong on that, because we played with everything from 0 up to like 55 degrees. What the angle does is it actually increases the speed at which, or the speed and the distance that the sear moves when you actuate the trigger. Anyway, we played with a bunch of that, but try and get a little bit better sear engagement and faster movement of the sear when you pull the trigger. So yeah, that tangent, or that side note. So now that you've got the spring installed, and your plate set right, obviously you would have applied Loctite before you did all this adjustment. Next thing you do is, hook up your three-way and retime your gun. Because the geometry is a little different, you can't just swap this straight in. There'll probably be some adjustment you'll need to do, some retiming you'll need to do. One other side note, do I have another frame here? I'll just pull this one off. The gunfighter frame has a front travel screw. You probably most likely won't need to mess with this, but I'll show it to you anyway just in case. Yeah, most likely this is not going to be the case, but if you find, let me get the light in there right, there's a or a little set screw at the front of the plate there. That's what limits the front travel. So if you find that your three-way is stopping short of going all the way forward, you can adjust this. It should be good to go as is, but just another note for anybody out there tuning, if there's maybe a slight tolerance stack up or something different on your frame, you can get in from the front of the frame here to adjust the set screw down in there that you can't see really. But anyway, so everything's adjusted properly. You've got your spring in there. You put your three-way on, retime your gun, and you should be good to go. And then obviously you can adjust your rear stop on this once you get your firing point set right and your cocking point set right, and then have enough travel for that all to work. Yeah, hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we will be glad to help you guys out. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.